Merci beaucoup, Jackson. Now let me introduce Michael Hall, who is the Vice President of Research at Imagine Canada, but also the lead researcher on this project. And Michael, many of you will know him or know of him, has been in fact one of the architects of this survey that started, as Jacqueline just told us, over 10 years ago, more than 10, about 15 years ago now. So Michael will come and give us the highlights of what has come out of the report this year. I also want to acknowledge David Lasby, who is also part of the research team at Imagine, working with Michael, who has been instrumental in getting this work done, and I can tell you it is no small feat. So Michael, I invite you to come up.
Bonjour tout le monde. It's a pleasure to be here today to present the results of the latest iteration of the Canada Survey of Giving, Volunteering and Participating. Just to get arranged. This is a survey that collects data about the ways in which Canadians support one another in their communities through their contributions of time and dollars to charities and nonprofit organizations. We also look a little bit at how people help one another directly, one-on-one, outside of organizations, and I'll be presenting some results on that for you. It's a survey that, and today's presentation, the survey and today's presentation is chock full of numbers and statistics. But as you're looking at them, I hope that you would just look beyond them a little bit and imagine all of the people who are providing those contributions in our communities. As I'll show you, our survey shows that virtually all Canadians give donations, volunteer, or help one another directly over the course of a year. So this is really a story about you, and it's a story about your neighbors, and your relatives, and your communities. The statistics kind of gloss over it. What we don't see is the actual impact of what people are doing on the ground in their communities through all of the contributions of time and money, but I can tell you that that impact is substantial and in fact critical to the quality of life in our country. So let me get to some of the findings. Virtually everybody makes a donation. 84% made a donation, and all of this survey is people age 15 and over. 84% of Canadians made a financial contribution over the one-year period in 2007. This survey was conducted in the fall of 2007. We asked people what they did in the previous year. The numbers are virtually unchanged in terms of the donor rate from 2004, no significant difference. The volunteer rate, 46% of Canadians, again 15 and older, volunteering, unchanged from 2004. And 84% helped each other directly. Again, stable results. There are some changes, and the changes are mostly around donations. Canadians gave $10 billion in 2007, which is a 12% increase from the previous year. Now, controlling for inflation, that's a 6% increase. Also, to put this in context, the population over that time period grew by 4%. So although that's a billion more dollars, 1.1 billion more dollars, when you take it into account, it's really quite modest growth. The average donation increased by 9% from $400 in 2004 to $437, but the average number of donations decreased. So we have the donor rate holding steady, an increase in the average donation, but Canadians are giving fewer donations, and this is a trend we're following. Which means for charities and nonprofits, it's already very competitive. It's getting more competitive because Canadians aren't making quite as many donations. They're giving the same amount, but they're choosing to consolidate their giving to some extent. One of the themes that we've been following since the first iteration of this study is the extent to which some Canadians are doing a lot more than others. Some Canadians are pulling their weight, others are letting them pull our weight for us. If you look at the red bar, it tells you that 8% of Canadians gave $1,000 or more in charitable donations over the course of a year. That's 10% of all donors, and they gave 62% of all the dollars. So we have 8% of the population giving 62% of the dollars. That's a very tiny concentration, very tiny segment that's driving the bulk of this giving. And who are those people who are giving? Well, we know they're not entirely representative of the population as a whole. They tend to be older. They have higher levels of education. They have higher levels of income. They're employed. They're more likely to be female, somewhat, in terms of the donor rate. They're married. And they're religiously active. And the role of religion is key in this. And as well, I'll show you, in fact, a significant portion of giving goes to religious organizations. So we have a very thin donor base. Virtually everybody gives, but most people actually give a very modest amount. And there are a small percentage of the population that are really driving the bulk of the numbers that we see. I want to just show you, I've mentioned age, education, and income. They're all related to giving. The higher the age, the greater the age, greater the income, greater the education, the more people give. I'll just show you the income slide, and it's virtually the same picture if you looked at age or if you looked at education. Those who have household incomes of $20,000 or less, 71% of those individuals make a donation. It climbs to 90% for those who give $100,000. For those who have $100,000 or more in household income, and the average amount increases directly with the level of household income, with a dramatic jump between the 100,000 and the 100,000 or more categories. So generally speaking, those who have more money give more money to charities and nonprofits in the country. However, and this is a finding which we've been following for some time, those who, if you look at this question in terms of how much do people give relative to their capacity to give, we get a very different picture. So if we look at the percentage, the amount that's given as a percentage of the income one has, we see that those who have the lowest levels of income in the country give the largest percentage of their household income to charities and profit organizations. So for those who make $6,000 to just under 20,000, and those who give 20 to 40,000, who have 20 to 40,000 in household income, they're giving at about 1.5% of their household income. When we move to those who have 100,000 or more, they're giving at about 0.5%. At Imagine Canada, we think that that's a clear sign that there's room for those who have higher levels of income to perhaps do more. Even though in absolute terms they're giving more, they have higher average donations. If you look at it relative to the amount of income they have, seems to be evidence that there's a lot more capacity to improve in terms of the donations. This survey have now begun to cycle in content. We don't ask the same questions every year, and this year we asked the role of early life experiences. And so we asked participants in the survey to tell us whether they were active in religious organizations as a young person, whether they were active in student government, whether their parents did volunteer work, whether they saw someone they admired helping others, and then we mapped that behavior to what they currently do in terms of their giving and volunteering. If you look at the donor rate, the people who are not active in any of those activities, who are not active, their donor rate is around 80%. If you look at those who have had those experiences as young people, it increases from 86% to 92%. We see even greater impact if we look at the average donation. So again, now you're looking at the average donations of people who have not had the experiences of being active in a religious organization, were not active in student government, their parents didn't do volunteer work, and so forth. If you look at the experiences of the current level of giving of those who have those experiences, you can see they're dramatically bigger. Particularly so for those who were active in religious organizations, as well as those who belong to a youth group, and whose parents did volunteer work. So we've seen this before. This is clear evidence that what a person does as a young person has an impact on their later life propensity to support their community through giving and volunteering, which suggests to us that there's a strategy for improving giving and volunteering in the country, for broadening that base, to broadening away from that thin base of support, and that is all around exposing young people to these models of activity and getting them engaged not only in doing volunteer work, fundraising, but also just getting them engaged in things like student government. Even participating in team sports makes a difference. People often want to know